freedom. Whatever it is, we all want it. We long for the day when the shackles that bind us and the prison doors that confine us are a thing of the past. And for a concept that seems so concrete, our experience of freedom can be so elusive. Barabbas, a notorious criminal who lived at the time of Jesus, sits on death row, guilty of treason and murder. Rome is preparing a cross with his name on it. But then, in what must have seemed like the blink of an eye, his shackles are removed. His prison door is opened, and he walks away a free man, destined for death, but given life. So if Barabbas could stand before us now, what would he tell us about the events of that day? When he speaks the name of Jesus, what story would he tell? You're invited into a moment of reset and discovery, because the events around the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus are the absolute answer to every longing heart. So may God give us eyes to see.
"30 years. It's been 30 years. And every time I tell the story, there's a part of this story that just, it's heavy. Like a stone that you find on the road and you pick it up, and it's just heavier than you thought it would be, and you can't set it down because there's just something about it that grabs you. I've told this story to my wife, to my boys. I share it with strangers who find out my name and come and ask me if the stories they heard are really true. I'm going to tell you tonight. But I'm going to tell you that the end of this story is not finished. It doesn't wrap up nicely. I'm still stuck in my own story. But what I can tell you is what happened. And the weight that I've carried in my chest ever since that day. I'll tell you what it's like the morning that you know you're going to die. I was silent. And you might think someone facing death would scream or cry or bargain with their whatever God they abandoned in their own life. But not me. I was just silent. It wasn't that I made peace, for sure, but there was something that I just let go of. I realized I just couldn't fight anymore. I just couldn't keep fighting. It was the end. My time had come. I had spent 3 days in that prison. A Roman prison is no room. It's a hole in the ground. It's carved out from the Praetorium. It sits underneath it. It's completely dark. The only light I ever saw was about an hour in the morning underneath the door when the guards were changing positions. And it was wet. The floor was wet. I don't mean damp, I mean wet. The stone walls, water continually creeped in. And cold. The kind of cold that takes warmth out of a man by degrees. And that floor is where you slept. If you slept. And I didn't sleep. There were other men in there with me. And we were chained with iron chains to the wall. And there was just enough slack on that wall to get to the other corner, and no more. The man next to me had been there for months. I won't describe to you what he looked like. I don't want to tell you even what it smelled like. It's amazing how, when you're in a place that is so bad, how you can start to become unaware of things. Maybe that's a shocking thing for us as human beings, to so easily become unaware of things that you should be so aware of. The conditions were horrible. Now, I don't want you to think that I'm not supposed to be there. I was guilty. I mean, for sure, I was guilty. Rome had thought I had done something that I certainly did do. There was an insurrection. There was an uprising that was going to happen in the streets. It had been planned for over 2 years. Myself and some other men thought that we could remove the fingers of Rome's grip upon our city if we could just attack them fast enough and strong enough and in just the right places. It didn't work. It never works. And then that night, it just ended in chaos. A man was dead, a Roman guard, by my hands, in an alley in the lower market. Look, I've killed before. I'm not going to dress that up. I deserved what I got. A long time ago, I thought that the results were, or the consequences were going to be okay because of what we were trying to accomplish. And maybe I still believe that. Or maybe I don't. But needless to say, Rome had their man. I did it. I killed. They had the right paperwork. I was guilty. There were other men in the cell with me for much less offenses than what I had. There was a man who was in there for stealing grain 3 different times. There was a slave who had punched his master. There was a boy just 17 years old who said the wrong thing to the wrong Roman soldier at the wrong time. But me? Yeah, I deserved to be there. I was supposed to be there. You know, Rome cast a wide net. Doesn't seem like they care much who they catch, as long as the count is right. So there we were. Now, I've had people asking me, they've said, why a cross? Why was that the tool that Rome was going to use against you? Why not beheading, or why not fire? Why not the arena? Well, you see, those things are all reserved for certain categories of men. Beheading, that was reserved for Roman citizens. It was mercy from Rome. I mean, if you can think of it that way. Fire, that was for spectacle. The arena, entertainment. But the cross, that was reserved for those that Rome wanted to make an example of. Those that were insurrectionists. Those that had defied Rome. And it wasn't just execution. For Rome, it was a statement. They designed it to be slow. It wasn't done in the city, it was done out on a hill. And outside of Jerusalem, there was this hill called Golgotha. And that's where they did it. And it was right at the road where everybody came into Rome, so that you could see what Rome did with those that turned against the mighty power of Rome. It took a long time to die through crucifixion. And even when you did, many times they just left the body there. That's what awaited me. That's what I thought about. That's what my head thought about. And then, as I sat inside that prison, and as I thought about what might be coming, I realized that cross was being crafted for me. Someone was hewing the cross. Rome would have you take that cross and strap it on you, and you would have to walk it through the city walls and streets. They wanted people to see you. They wanted to humiliate you. They wanted people to see what would happen to those that stood up against Rome. I had seen many men before me walk the road, the condemned road. And now I was getting ready to walk that exact same road. And then I heard this murmuring. It was the crowd outside. They were making some kind of noise. It is impossible to hear words down inside that cell. But I could hear the crowd. And it started moving in this rhythmic fashion. I'd never heard something like that before. It was as if the crowd had a life of its own, like it was demanding something and it wasn't going to stop until it got it. It got so loud that all of a sudden I picked up on the words it was saying, because the words the crowd was saying was a word that I knew intimately. Barabbas. 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 And they kept chanting it over and over again. You would probably think that I was anxious or nervous when I heard that. In all honesty, it wouldn't be the first time I caused a crowd to chant my name. There was something different about this one. And while the chanting continued, all of a sudden I saw light from underneath that door. It wasn't morning time. It wasn't time for the changing of the guards. The crowd is chanting, and all of a sudden the door flies open, and there is a Roman soldier. And he comes down to where my chains are, and he looks directly at me. And he doesn't have the look he normally has, because normally he looks at me in contempt. This time he just had a blank stare. And he grabbed my chain. And he unlocked it. And when the chain hit the floor, he said just 2 words. You're free. Free. I took my first steps towards the door. Slowly, because I couldn't believe what was going to happen. I thought maybe I would be struck. But he continued to let me walk. And I stepped out into the afternoon sun. And I looked up, and it was blinding to me. I hadn't seen that light for days. I almost felt like it was burning my skin. I had no instructions, nowhere I had to go. I was just out. So I started to duck into the shadows and look around. I didn't know who would recognize me. So I tried to hide. And as I ducked into the shadows, as I looked around, I started to hear what had taken place. I didn't ask anyone. No one told me. But I could hear it because everyone was talking about it. That man that was out there, his name was Jesus. And it was the Passover season. It was the time in which that the governor of Rome would give the people of Jerusalem a political gift. They could release one of their prisoners. Now, the person that they were chanting was my name, but up against the person, Jesus. I honestly didn't know much of anything about him at that time. I mean, I'd heard some rumors about him. I had heard his name a little bit. I think I had seen him at one point. There was a big crowd. I'm not sure if I figured out which one was him. But as I heard the stories, I heard that this Jesus was a rebel. But he hadn't killed anyone. He hadn't done anything but apparently preach these messages. He was a preacher. But Rome didn't like what he said, so they were convicting him. And so Pilate put before the people Jesus or Barabbas. And that crowd called my name. A murderer. Sure, I was one of theirs, but so was Jesus. For a man who had done very little to be there, for a man, from what I had heard, talked about peace, the crowd chose me. They chanted my name over and over again. Rumor has it that Pilate was resistant, but the crowd wouldn't let up. Barabbas, Barabbas, Barabbas. And finally, Pilate relented and called for my freedom. Jesus was going to take my place that day. As I walked the streets, nothing felt the same. I had been through such a traumatic event of trying to focus on and get myself ready for the torture that was coming, and to just be instantly freed, you can't just shake that from yourself. I don't think I've ever shaken it. I think I still wear it as a cloak. I think it's still a shadow that follows me everywhere I go. Nothing has seemed the same since that day. It feels heavy inside me. And as I walked the streets, I ducked into a couple of taverns that I knew, and that didn't feel right. And I ducked around in some places that I knew, and everything just seemed unfamiliar. And the crowd started to build in the streets. It had been a couple of hours. And sure enough, here came the procession. First I saw the crowd gather, then I saw the Roman guards. And as they marched their way through the streets, there behind were those being crucified. And there was Jesus, carrying the cross that was my cross to bear. And as he made his way through, people were jeering. People were cursing, spitting. And then something happened, and I have never felt okay about this, and I am not embellishing in any way, shape, or form. But when Jesus came by me, and he was as close as he was going to be, he glanced at me. I mean, I think he did. It was just a moment, less than a moment. And I saw him. And the crowd filled in, and he was gone. And as the crowd followed and marched along, I couldn't move. I was stuck in my spot. That was to be me. That cross was mine. That cross was honed from a tree for me. And this man that I didn't know, and a crowd that I didn't even care for, called my name. And that man took my place. They took him to Golgotha, and they hung him. And I'm sure you've heard the stories of what happened next. I'm not here to litigate that. I don't know. Seems fanciful to me. But here's the strange thing. The days and weeks after were quiet. And then talk started happening again. And all of a sudden, some of the people that were following him were no longer hidden in the shadows, and they started to stand up. And over the months and the years to follow, I traveled for business. I mean, my kind of business. And I went to Antioch. I went to Damascus. And every place I went, there were these churches that were starting up. They were preaching about this man named Jesus, that he had rose from the dead. But the thing about his story is that Jesus talked about that he was going to die for people. That his plan all along was to give his life to die for others, and not just others, but for sinners. I have always asked the question, it is the question that sits here in me so heavy. Why me? I'm not a good man. I don't necessarily want to be a bad man. It's the choice I've made. It's the course I'm on. It's what I know. But why me? Recently, I was walking through this community, and one of his followers, he's really up and up now, and he was preaching, telling the story of Jesus, talking about the way he lived his life, and how he taught us to love other people and called us to love others the way we want to be loved. I've never heard that before. And said the same story I keep hearing, is that he died for sinners. That he willingly took his own life. That Rome didn't take it from him, but that he chose to give it. And that was my night. That was my cross. That was my crucifixion. I was to have the view from Golgotha that overlooked the city. But instead, I've been hiding in the shadows ever since. And as I heard that man preach, and as I heard him proclaim who Jesus was, I felt this burn inside of me. The weight was so heavy I couldn't contain it any longer, and I had to ask the question that I had been afraid to ask, the question that I don't even want to ask of myself. I didn't want to be recognized. So I stayed in the shadow as best I could. And I made my way through the crowd. And I got up to that preacher. And he put his hand on me. And I didn't look him in the eye. But I just asked him one question. Why me? And the preacher said, why not?